Hi there. This video is on my predictions for Game of Thrones Season 8, which is this Sunday, and I'm recording it on Tuesday. So I don't have time to put together a whole video with a lot of images. I'm recording this cold with no script, mostly just audio, except once or twice when I'll point out that there's an image I want you to look at. Please turn back to that. Otherwise, this is more of a podcast. I just wanted to get out really quickly. Everyone for months has been making Season 8 prediction videos, even before we had trailers, and the trailers didn't say that much. So with everyone picking this apart, what were my Season 8 predictions? The short version. One sentence. I think it's going to be a lot like Season 7. All of the failings, all of the plot holes, all of the mischaracterization, and how dissatisfied everyone was with it. Even TV-only fans that defended things like Season 5. That why would you think suddenly the final season will be better because it's the final season? We've seen this downward trend from Season 5 onwards. And for people going, no, it'll finish strong, like it will be as dissatisfying as the White Hunt. And that is how it's going to end. It isn't going to dig them out of the hole they're in now. Long version. A couple of points I was going through in my head. First, it doesn't matter what happens in Season 8. For a couple of reasons, first of which, it isn't the real ending. It's been so drastically changed, it cannot reflect the book ending. Even something on the scale of, like, seriously, I think if an Arya or Tyrion scale character dies, like if Arya dies in Season 8, I would not take that as any hint she will die in the books. If she lives in Season 8, I will not see that as a guarantee that she will live in the books. I seriously think they'd be willing to change who lives or dies, something on that level. And more importantly than that, the manner of their death. People have been treating characters living and dying as cliff notes. That this isn't a real story. You're just reading through a spoiler list when who lives or dies, who lives or dies. More important is if their death is told well. Simple question, tell me in the comments. Does Duran Martel live in the books? Is the TV show an indication of that? Less drastically, Barristan Selmy. Barristan Selmy dying in Season 5. What if Season 5 was the final season? Season 8. His death was so rushed that while, yes, he might die in the books, I think he probably will at some point in battle, the manner has been so drastically changed, it isn't a spoiler or even a substitution for it. What about Thoros of Myr in Season 7? That's a bigger one because it happened just last year, closer to the end of the TV show. Is Thoros of Myr, was his death satisfying? That's the phrase they use because it's an appeal to emotion, not logic. Was his death in Season 7 fulfilling the predictions of people online of who lives or dies, which is really just gibberish and wild speculation with no basis in evidence? And in the books, you can point to evidence of, oh, this is why I think Cersei will live or not. Thoros. What was gained from Thoros of Myr dying? Imagine if that happened like at the beginning of Season 8 instead of the end of Season 7, and they just pushed it around a little. That isn't really a book spoiler, because his storyline has been changed too much. And what were we actually spoiled on in the TV show? I'm talking about the TV show as a whole since Season 5. People going, oh no, the TV show spoiled everything. Not really. What if most of this is stuff that you could probably have predicted, which is why a lot of people say it's fan fiction of reasonable extrapolations at best, not to mention the wild divergence. It's like, we know there's going to be a big battle in the north to defeat the Boltons at some point, right? So what were we spoiled on? Like, the plot mechanics of Jon Snow's resurrection? They were non-existent. People were complaining about that. It was just Davos went up to Melisandre. It's the hand of the writers going, hey, Melisandre, can you bring Jon Snow back from the dead? And How would he know? Like, I guess someone could have told him about Beric Dondarrion, but its plot events were falling into place. In the books, they imply it's going to be something with, like, Ghost, his mind going into Ghost. I don't know. But we didn't really learn anything. And people treated it as this huge shock of, oh no, Jon Snow is dead. Well, in the TV show, whereas in the books, it was really hinted he'd come back somehow, even in the 5th book, because it's the cliffhanger ending. How stupid are people, gullible and following TV, that, oh no, the main character... Yeah, I guess the Red Wedding main characters can die in the show, but it's just so much was setting that up. You know at this point characters could be brought back from the dead, but other things that we were spoiled on, the mechanics of Jon Snow's storyline, not really, or even broad points of it. Battle of the Bastards isn't going to happen in the novels, it is Kit Harington fan fiction. Stannis is going to defeat Ramsay in the books. Nothing in the Ramsay plot really reflects the books at all. What do we know for sure? They said Shireen burns. They never said Stannis burns her. Maybe Melisandre burns her without his permission. And that Hodor means hold the door, and the mechanics of that might be a little different, but that's probably straight from the books. Other than those two things, storyline by storyline, it isn't really what's going to happen, with like Arya having this crazy chase with the waif. We'll see what happens on that, but character by character, Sansa, Stannis, so much was changed, it's not really spoiling the books. That's just the first point. And I said I'll show one or two images here. These are people from my Twitter feed. Ideas of Ice and Fire. I mean, I agree. To assume that just because Benioff and Weiss were told some vague version of the ending that they would necessarily follow through, or that they even could, is silly considering the amount of material they have already drastically altered. That they were told what Sansa's storyline is and they chose to abandon it. And even if they wanted to suddenly follow book storylines at this point, they're so drastically altered they can't, physically. Or A Song of Ice and Fire Defender. George himself has stated a few occasions just in the last year alone that the show's ending couldn't possibly match his own because they've already made too many drastic changes. Let's take George's word on this one. So, just, it changed too much, and that's just the first point, and I understand, oh, it's not the books. That is only my starting point, okay? I understand that. It's weird that paradoxically, when you run into the real cult fans of the TV show, paradoxically, how can people also think at the same time, ha, we're getting the ending faster than the book fans. Ah, you stupid smarties. You like reading. We're getting the TV ending first. You're getting the ending someone made up. You could have just asked the person sitting next to you on the couch. But it's the paradox, that doublethink. The doublethink of the same person. You've seen this online. People going, well, the books are the books and the show are the show. That is called a thought-terminating cliche. That yes, it's different, but even people who only watch the TV show in the early seasons are starting to criticize you. That the same people going, well, the show is simply different from the books. It doesn't need to be the book ending, are also claiming that this will spoil the ending of the books for them. It can't be both. But moving on from that, because that is just a starting point, even just as a TV show, ignoring the books, as best I can, because I have read them, just ignoring the books, purely in terms of a TV show, of a hype show, the ending is meaningless. Because they made it up as they went along, at whim. Just showing off the actors. I've talked about this in all my videos. That there wasn't a season-to-season plan. Every major change was, as we were writing this season, we came up with a big new idea. Dorne, Stannis, Sansa, Battle of the Bastards. These aren't coherent story arcs, and they've even admitted, like Arya and stuff, we drastically changed things with, wow, I got this impulsive new idea from season to season. I'm comparing this directly to hype shows that went off the rails as they got incoherent and it became apparent that you weren't planning this out. Lost, Battlestar Galactica, Heroes, where even the writers admitted, well, we're just kind of making it up as we went along. Well, then what happens in the final season of Battlestar or Heroes doesn't matter. There is no coherent fictional character anymore. So it's not book Arya versus TV Arya, and I help run a wiki on this. There is no TV Arya. There's just Maisie Williams playing a stereotype of herself. And they've admitted this in interviews. Oh yeah, we write her like Maisie at this point. This isn't new. We've seen this before in other shows that got bad over time. It's just these two frauds are in charge of it, so it happened really fast, even though it's a book adaptation. I'm talking fast because I'm angry. It's just, we've seen this, where by the end, the characters, it's called being Flanderized, are Flanderized into stereotypes of themselves, or in this case, the celebrity actors. So point one, it's not going to be the book ending, which simply means it's not going to spoil the books. Point two, even just as a TV show, ignoring the books, this has been written so incoherently that Who Lives or Dies, what are my predictions for Who Lives or Dies in Season 8? I think they're going to make it up at whim, based on actor favoritism. Next point. What if it's good? Yeah, just covering all the bases here. What if it happens to be good? That is a question. In the sense that it doesn't have the overt plot holes of Season 7 and other seasons. Regardless of the books, just if, as a TV show for 6 episodes, what if it is at least internally consistent with itself? What if, within the context of Season 8, everything makes sense? Like, I hated the final season of Battlestar Galactica, but admittedly it was internally consistent to itself, whereas Season 3 was not. Well, 2 points to that. First, I really doubt it will be good on its own terms in the scale of like a Season 4. Like, at best, we're looking at a Season 6, and that had all sorts of problems. Even Season 6 had massive plot holes. People just didn't want to admit it. So what if it's good? First off, I seriously doubt that. But more importantly, second, it won't be coherent relative to other TV seasons. The show as a whole is incoherent. This is the cult fans trying to get a foot in the door. I've seen people doing this, going, say something nice about the show. Say something nice about the show. Because you're trying to compartmentalize, and it's like an abusive relationship. Get me to admit that you did one thing right, as opposed to all the other stuff that was abusive. Their minds want to fix it. It's people like who after Season 5 are going, well, the Sansa rape and Duran were pretty bad, but wasn't Hardhome good? It doesn't make up for those. Philosophically, I don't think anything could. That's why we're angry Season 5 onwards. There were flaws before, but they're so bad now, nothing can outweigh them. It's not just forgivable minor detours. So even if Season 8 is good on its own terms in isolation, all of the bad stuff already happened. The damage has been done, and they will be judged for that. That it can't pay off on story arcs that were already poorly set up in earlier seasons. I have this mental image, if you had a book in 3 parts, where the first 2 parts were damaged in a fire so much that you couldn't really read any of the setup, and the last third was really good, it isn't the whole experience. This was inherently something that needed to be good across multiple seasons, that people want Season 8 to be good, so they can compartmentalize and say that the TV show as a whole was good. But no matter how good Season 8 is, it can't make up for... This isn't just a one-off bad season. Oh, Season 5 was just a fluke. It has been bad for 3 years already. And a lot of people... 5 and 7 were really bad. 6 had more momentum because it put back in some book stuff like River Run and The Ironborn. But a lot of people convinced themselves that Season 6 fixed everything. It didn't. Season 6 is actually the point when I turned on the show. I was gaping at the screen after the Battle of the Bastards and went, this is pandering Kit Harington for an Emmy Award, and you kept promising Sansa would do something and she did become a political leader. What am I watching? That it wasn't just formulaic, and then I watched DVD commentaries and realized they're showing off the actors. But Season 6, list off, objectively, not as a talking point, what was fixed. Was there ever a storyline that was bad that then got better in this TV show? Dorne didn't get better in Season 6, they dropped it in humiliating fashion. They could have just moved away from it, they had to destroy it. Or the Arya storyline, which was one of the few good ones in Season 5, turned bad in Season 6 with the waif chase. What was a bad storyline that later got better? Daenerys' storyline was decent in Season 5, it remained decent in Season 6. Why were people cheering in Season 6? What was the thing that improved? Let's not beat around the bush. It was the Ramsay storyline. That is what people were saying improved. No! What people fixate on is, quote, Jon Snow punching Ramsay Snow who raped Sansa. Doesn't this make up for the last season? I was gaping at the stupidity of that. This moment isn't earned. I'm not the only one saying this. It's leading the audience by the nose. And a lot of critics were pointing out there's just as many flaws in Season 6 as there were in Season 5. It's just that instead of random bad things are happening, random good things are happening, I am still criticizing your writing. Sansa doesn't meet Ramsay in the books, and the only way you were able to make a villain threatening is to have him rape a female lead, then you're bad at writing villains. So, for Season 8 hype, it feels like the build-up to Season 6 all over again, with the Battle of the Bastards. How just seeing promo clips of it, of the Battle of the Bastards, without actually seeing it as an episode, a subset of fandom, you remember being there. Remember how after we saw the promos for Battle of the Bastards, a subset of fandom already concluded it was the best battle ever? Based purely on the production scale without the story parts. But this might be abstract, okay? Let's focus on the big seven, the core characters. What new events could happen in Season 8 that they've already set up well? That if they make up something new at the last minute, that will not match the rest of the show, and it'll be poor setup on a scale of seasons, which will detract from Season 8. That you're not doing this well, it feels like you skipped a season. What are things they've already set up? I fear that they're going to try to introduce setup in episode 1 of Season 8, with a mere 6 episodes to go. And of all the fan theories, you've heard all of them. Some people say, oh, the Azor Ahai legend about Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised originally who defeated the White Walkers thousands of years ago, it said Azor Ahai forged his magic sword Lightbringer by plunging it into the heart of his beloved wife to absorb her soul, his wife Nissa. So some people are wondering will Jon Snow kill Daenerys to forge Lightbringer again? If they do, they shouldn't be introducing that in the final season. Even if they explain that with Bran explaining it in a vision in episode 1, they have never mentioned Azor Ahai by name in the TV show before. Or the Lightbringer legend. So it would feel very rushed and just random if that indeed happens. That I don't think it'll happen, and if it does, it's like someone predicting the White Hunt of, are you proud that you predicted something this random? Other things, will Jaime strangle Cersei? Or will Arya? Both of them are technically the younger sibling. Gender-neutral term, the younger sibling will strangle you. Well, they never set up in the TV show that part of Maggie the Frog's prophecy about how Cersei dies. So even if they introduce it in the season premiere, it won't really be payoff to a years-long build-up. In contrast with, say, the mystery of Jon Snow's parentage, or who killed Jon Arryn, there's no payoff to it. Or what if Tyrion is a secret Targaryen? They never set that up in live action. It set up something like the Mad King was always perving on Tywin's wife, Joanna. And I don't think that's true. The timeline doesn't match up. But even if they choose to do that, it's, you didn't set this up at all. So it will feel rushed, even if it'll feel like you jumped into a different TV show, which is pretending that season 7 set all of these things up when it didn't. What I'm trying to say is that this late into it, they basically have 3 options. First one is, if they want to do something like whatever the book ending is going to be like for these characters, and they cram in a lot of exposition really fast, really rushed at the beginning of season 8, when that isn't something you should be doing, it confuses the audience, it is too late to be cramming this in, even if you get it in intelligibly. And I've seen some people argue for option 2, which is generally similar story beats would happen, but let's take out all of that clunky exposition that gets in the way. What you're describing is how Littlefinger died in season 7. That, well, let's just take out all of the explanations for things. If the explanations take too much time, let's take them out. You're arguing for a show with no explanations for things, where things just fall into place, and we don't need all that veil set up for Littlefinger. That is not a co-equal strategy. That is worse than rushed exposition. No exposition. And they might try a little of both. Option 3 is if they make no attempt to do exactly what the books will be like, even in outline form, saying, even the general points of, what if Jon has to make Lightbringer by killing Daenerys with his sword to get it magic enough to kill the White Walkers, or Tyrion being a Targaryen, or any of those other things. Maybe they'd go with something else entirely, and the absence of something is easier, like don't include, Tyrion might be a Targaryen, but the big stuff of the defeat of the White Walkers with Cersei's death, you would either have to come up with an entirely new thing, or cram in exposition. And some of the new things they might come up with might not be half bad, of like, this is how this character dies in this story arc. What if Grey Worm tragically dies in battle because of his doomed love for Missandei? That might even work and be pleasant. And that's not in the books at all, their love story. But other stuff like, were you happy with how Thoros died? Thoros of Myr in season 7, did that have any impact? So Martin had 20 years to think of these story arcs for the core characters that were in the first book, and how it'll play out, that you're saying that with less time, since they started going off book a lot in season 5, was 3 or 4 years with production time, and with their attention divided by production issues, they're not just screenwriting the whole time, that they managed to come up with a better, or at least equal in quality, ending. Or even just a good ending for a TV show, not comparing it to whatever the books do. There's so much they set up in seasons 1 to 4 when they thought they were going to do the book ending. And Martin's openly saying on the red carpet for season 8, this should have gone on more years than this. There was more story than that. And not just to do it accurately, even if you cut out Dorne or something. Things were rushed. They did 2 books in 1 season in season 5. That too much has been happening too fast, too much was introduced that they won't follow through on. They're even jokingly saying in interviews, we won't explain everything. I've seen this shit before with Lost and Battlestar Galactica when they ended, and people were blindly accepting when in a friendly, punctuated with a chuckle, they go, it won't answer all your questions, this won't be good endings for, what if it's not a good ending for Arya? And by good, I mean coherent, sensical. There's a chance it might be a sensical story on its own terms, but like Arya killing the Freys in the TV show was extremely truncated, but worked on its own merits, internal logic, as opposed to dragons zipping around to the wall and back. So I don't know, but those are the 3 scenarios of, will it be good TV? Well, if the best plan is really if they don't even try to follow an outline from the books, because either there won't be enough explanation or it'll be too late. What if they try to just follow the general outline trends? It doesn't even need to be too different from the book, just a simplified version of it. Maybe, but other example I think of is Barristan Selmy. Imagine if Barristan's death was in season 8. This was pushed back to the final season. Don't worry about logic, just that, okay, he's dying. In the books, he has this whole unrequited love for Ashara Dane, who died, right? If you haven't heard of her, Ashara Dane, he was in love with her. And in the books, he might, I don't know, I'm making up an example, die killing a member of the Golden Company during their invasion, and he'll be run through with a sword, but stab the other guy in the neck and go, you were of House Ironwood, you were always enemy of House Dane, here I avenge Ashara Dane or something. I'm making up something stupid. That would make sense. Trust me, that would make context make sense in the books. What if Barristan did that in his final season? Either you'd have to dump in a bunch of explanation about who Ashara Dane was, 5 minutes worth, in your final season, or what would be even weirder is if he just, with no explanation of who Ashara Dane is, plunged his sword into his killer's throat, going, "With this I avenge Ashara Dane," and that's even worse than if you rushed an explanation of who she was, give no explanation. The third option is the best one, which is just have him die fighting somehow, which is so generic that it isn't really the epic storytelling that we came to see. And some people argue, well, they'll come up with another really good story death for Barristan. Do they have a track record of coming up with great character deaths? Some people liked how the Tyrells died. Other people thought there's all these plot holes in it, Olenna dying was filled with plot holes from how is Highgarden falling this fast, that even casual viewers were catching on. But the Great Sept was function. Will it be functional for the TV-only fans? That is the question. And not just Barristan. Oh God, I'm thinking of this now. What about Brynden Tully? Blackfish Tully, that whatever he's doing in the next book, their choices were put in a lot of exposition time for it, do something vaguely similar to it without explanation, or make up a new ending, which is, he died off screen. And while that doesn't violate the physical logic of their world that he could die fighting guards, it's anticlimactic, and it wasn't worth the setup we invested in these characters. So I think looking at their track record of have they been making good endings for these people? So my big points are, first, I predict that Season 8 will be a lot like Season 7. And really, Seasons 5 and 6, the parts of 6 that people don't like to remember, that it has been a downward trend of just Benioff having less and less supervision, and he didn't have much to begin with. And even in Season 7, they said there was this big shift. The Jamie actor said you could feel it on set, them saying, "This is ours now, not Martin's. Shut up and read the lines the way I told you," and not listening to other people. It's getting steadily worse. They never got humbled. And given how much Benioff has been hyping up that Season 8 is what I've always really wanted, even the 1 through 7 were just set up for this, that since Martin told me the outline in Season 1 of the general steps of the story, I've been waiting for this, the battle between the living and the dead, and it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be like the scale of 3 movies, the budget of a movie trilogy. That last interview he actually gave talking about that was deeply disturbing, where he's ranting about, I lied to everyone about this is the thing I really wanted to see. What a big action scene where if you didn't introduce the characters well enough, why are we invested in them? Why are we invested in the Beric Dondarrions and even Brienne of Tarths of the world? Brienne of Tarth, who stares at a candle since Season 5. She hasn't done anything. Maybe the celebrity actor cults around Jon Snow and Daenerys will keep people invested, but given how much he's been hyping up what it's going to be like, I think in Season 8, as scary it is to say, we will truly see David Benioff unfettered. Just from the way he's hyped up, that everything else before this, I was just lying to people and racing. Season 7, people saying it's racing through this content to get it to where it needs to be in Season 8, so he can play with his toys. And these other comments about it, they will be reconceiving the role to show off the actors' talents, these performances and these faces. that a lot of it will be stereotyping the actors in their own roles. And they describe this. They keep saying how there's a surprisingly large amount of ad-libbed improv comedy in it. What? There's this interview saying that, and how jokey it will be, and someone said one scene is the funniest that the show has ever had. And, like, maybe in context it's a funny, dark, black humor joke, but it's, why would they be having their funniest season yet in the middle of the apocalypse? The trailers don't look like that. Maybe we're taking their comments out of context and some black humor thing, like of how Duran dies or something. I don't know, but it was weird. And particularly, when I say it's going to be like Season 7, I also specifically use the example of it'll be a lot like Season 6, Episode 8, No One, the Arya Waif Chase episode, right, which they put right before Battle of the Bastards, in part because you can tell they put the least effort into that one and cut corners there, knowing people would forget after how big Battle of the Bastards was. It's not just the Arya Chase. If you've forgotten that, Google it and look up the story description again so you remember. Like on the wiki article, it was filled with self-indulgent references to Season 1, earlier seasons. And not like there is such a thing as a clever shout-out to an earlier season, versus this is just you resting on your laurels and trying to remind everyone of how great Season 1 was. Shut up and praise me. That can get self-indulgent when it's just a bunch of references to how good the earlier seasons were. And it even sort of makes sense. They have openly said Daenerys arriving at Winterfell will parallel how King Robert arrived at Winterfell visually. Monarch visiting Winterfell at visual callbacks. And that actually makes sense in many ways, but it's not inherently bad, but if they go overboard with it, and I really think they're going to hit us hard with that feather, that goddamn feather that they've been obsessing over since the pilot at Lyanna's tomb, because it's their idea, not Martin's, and people kept telling them not to put in new ideas. I believe we will see Benioff and Weiss being very petty. I am worried that even though it is in Euron's character to sexually abuse Cersei after marrying her, because he is a monster in the books, and probably would do that once he marries her in the books, which I think will happen. I really think they're going to emphasize that scene to spite their critics. I mean, I worry about that. I don't know if they'll actually do it, but there's so many other things where, like, they would put something back in that they were told not to do in an earlier season just because they're angry. They're children. People tell them not to do things. I don't know. That's just wild speculation. There's no reason to think they'll do that. But what I do really think they're going to do is have a bunch of giant scenes showing off the actors. Like Hardhome was a rehash of Battle of Castle Black to show off Kit Harington. How self-indulgent and just showing off the Kit Harington cult vanity project Battle of the Bastards was. And the White Hunt was already a rehash of a rehash of a rehash. You're going to see basically a rehashed mix of all three of those once again on a bigger scale around Winterfell. And how they're praising the scale and spectacle of it, and not, the story doesn't make too much sense, and it's kind of boring because the enemy are undead zombies. I mean, they're not story interactions, not politics. So it'll be like that times 3 and on a bigger scale, and not just production scale, but Benioff feeling he can get away with anything because he's got nothing to fear for another season renewal at this point. And just that they want to direct the finale themselves. They've directed 2 episodes before. They weren't particularly memorable and had no real camera work in them. And it'll be a lot of tight watch for this, when there's no camera movements, there's no cinematography, and it's just tight close-ups showing off the faces with no dialogue. It was eye-opening watching Season 7 like that, and seeing that, like, there's no dialogue in The White Hunt for a full 9 minutes. Beyond shouting, there's no significant lines. And it's a bunch of zooming in on the faces. And you've seen my videos, just the screenshots, they're holding these shots to do that. So it'll be all the problems we've already seen, just times 3, is really what I think is going to happen. It'll be like Season 7, which was itself like Season 5 and 6, only worse. That's point 1. Second point is, this can't really be the book ending for good or ill, because too much has changed. So we're not really getting that spoiled. They can't really claim, people yelling at you online, just tell them, you can't do both. You can't say we got spoiled on the ending before all you smarties who read the books. It's totally different at this point. Martin has said this. It just, regardless of whether it's good or bad, it's not the same. And, like, I don't think there might, if Daenerys gets killed with a sword to make Lightbringer, that might be how the books do it. People already speculated that might happen in the books. That's not too big of a spoiler. But even if, like, Arya dies in the TV show, I will think she might live in the books. And if she lives in the show, I'll think she might die in the books. They would change something on that scale due to actor favoritism. But for good or ill, it's not the book ending. And in isolation as a TV show, well, who lives or dies, point 3 now, who lives or dies is meaningless if the story arcs are random, if they're written at whim. I remember this with Lost and Battlestar Galactica, where, like, Battlestar, they openly said, oh yeah, that one character, like Hilo, the pilot, he was going to originally die in the first draft of the finale, but we really like him, so we decided he should live. It's not just who dies, it's who lives randomly is also insulting and meaningless. That if you're just randomly pairing off, you've seen in, like, the late X-Files or some other really crappy finale, that if you're just picking stuff based on what's cool and actor favoritism, we could have just asked ourselves, you're just a fanboy doing stuff due to favoritism. You weren't making a story arc. That we could have asked any of the other YouTubers or people around news sites making their own predictions that you're co-equal to the rest of us, that in terms of making up an ending, because you're not professional writers. So I point to, okay, point 1, it's going to be like season 7. Point 2, it won't be like the books, for good or ill. And point 3, the trend we've really seen is that they're doing things at whim, which inherently, even in isolation as a TV show, I point to Battlestar and Lost, that, or other, like, Star Trek shows where that really has never been good, when things are happening randomly due to coolness. And point 4, last one, can it still be good TV? The damage has already been done in terms of setup that could or should have happened already. And maybe they'll play it really simplistically, where we just get a lot of fighting, but they're not introducing new storylines. It just wraps up what we already saw. That is really their best case scenario, that it just wraps up fairly quickly. And it might be serviceable, but it still wouldn't follow through on the promise of the first 4 seasons, and they're already saying there's stuff we don't really address. How could they wrap up this much story in a truncated 6-episode season that they've even now already introduced? So much setup was already gutted, and so many weird points happened that even if it's a good season, it's not going to redeem the whole show as much as they'd like to think it will in their memory of compartmentalizing. You forget it all. Wasn't this a good episode? Well, no, we still remember how bad seasons 5 to 7 were. And when has something suddenly gotten good again like that? So that's what I think season 8 will be like, and my hope is that people finally, people already finally realized how bad Benioff was in season 7, were openly mocking him. It'll be great if he fails even harder in similar fashion after season 8, and it turns into the tipping point where it becomes a meme of this guy is an idiot, beyond any of our news sites' capability to control it. Just the general TV population of the world has similar reactions to how bad it is. And no one can, like how the White Hunt was, it wasn't one person directed the conversation and said it was bad. All the different websites, nations, different language groups across the globe were saying this is terrible television. And I think we're going to see a similar reaction to that. Now, wrapping this up here, these are my predictions of what season 8 will be like. I'm going to split this off now because it's long, and it's for my subscribers who are actually willing to listen to me for this long. And in the next video, which is part 2 of this, I want to talk about what I predict is going to happen after season 8 ends. I mean, for the franchise as a whole, with prequel projects and the fandom's reaction to the ending and all of that. So this was what I predict season 8 will be like. It doesn't matter who lives or dies. It doesn't reflect the books. It isn't a good story arc. There is no TV Sansa at this point. There's Sophie Turner in a Sansa costume, mugging shots, and whether she dies, whether she lives, I don't care. Not because it isn't the books, because it isn't a coherent TV character. Much as I didn't really care about the deaths in X-Men 3, or who lived at the end of X-Men 3, because it was a bad movie.